Injury is par for the course in the wrestling industry. One day you might be flying high, and then with one false step you could be flying straight to ER. And when you step through the ropes, you're entrusting your safety to those you're actually wrestling against. So while it might sound weird, more often than not your kayfabe enemies could end up being your real-life saviors. So let's look at some horrendous near misses that were thankfully averted. And if you want to, you can see the written version of this that we published a few months ago here at WhatCulture.com. I'm Jules, your one per list wonder, and these are 10 times WWE wrestlers saved other wrestlers from injury. Number 10. Chris Jericho saves Jeff Hardy. On a 2009 episode of SmackDown, number one contender Jeff Hardy squared off against Chris Jericho. If Jericho were to win the match, he'd be added to the World Heavyweight Championship picture with Hardy and Edge at that year's Judgment Day pay-per-view. It was a big opportunity to say the least, but it was almost blown when Hardy looked absolutely gassed about 7 minutes in. After trying to set up a whisper in the wind that looked more like a gasp in the arse, Jeff looked ready to collapse on the top rope. However, noticing his opponent was struggling, Jericho moved behind him and attempted to prop him up to save Hardy from falling, all the while looking like he'd struck Hardy from behind. This simple act and the quick reactions likely saved Hardy from landing on his head or neck, and while Jeff did go on to lose at Judgment Day, he only got there intact thanks to Jericho. Number 9. Seth Rollins saves Seth Rollins. This one is deeply uncomfortable to watch, even though it's probably the least immediately dramatic. Back in 2014, Roman Reigns and Randy Orton were having a lovely old pillow fight when Seth Rollins and Corporate Kane interfered and caused a DQ. Then Orton signaled for a cage to be lowered, which was used earlier in the night in an attempt to trap Roman in there with him. Rollins attempted to join in the fray, but much like Adam Wilborn trying to get into a club with his baby face, was flat denied. Good thing too, though, as a large metal spike almost skewered Rollins as he tried to get in. Now, for those wondering why a spike was on a cage, it's actually used to stabilize and fix it into position, but it almost turned Seth into a kebab. He was still able to get the chair into the ring, but it almost cost him his life. Seriously, go and watch it. It's a horrifying moment. Number 8. The Undertaker saves Big Show. In a blink and you'll miss it moment, the quick thinking of The Undertaker might have saved the Big Show a big old headache. In 2001, right at the apex of the Invasion storyline, there was a big spot on SmackDown where Kurt Angle came in and started doling out the Angle slams. As he picks up the Big Show, which is no mean feat, good old Mark is looking at the registered impact zone and notices a chair in the way. Using his foot, he pulls the chair towards him while the crowd are still gasping at the effort put on by Kurt, and all goes as smooth as you'd like. I mean, sure, the Angle slam still hurts, but it would have hurt a whole lot more had he landed on a steel chair. Props to Taker for his unparalleled ring awareness. Number 7. Fandango saves Cody Rhodes. About halfway through 2013, Cody Rhodes turned face for the first time in half a decade, as his teammate turned traitor Damien Sandow stole the Money in the Bank briefcase from right under his nose. Usually when somebody does a heel or face turn, they have to wrestle lower card guys for a couple of weeks to firmly establish themselves in their new role and to put themselves over as a new threat. As such, Cody went one-on-one with Fandango of all people on an episode of Raw. During the bout, Cody went to the top rope to perform a moonsault. Though Fandango was already a bit too far away for comfort, Rhodes was clearly about to come up short and land hard on the unforgiving mat below. Sensing the danger of the situation, Fandango scrambled into place, just barely catching Rhodes on his way down. It's not clear who was out of place at the time, but all we can be grateful for is that Cody didn't end up having to return to the face mask dashing Cody Rhodes gimmick out of necessity. Number 6. Ankle Saver, Code Breaker. Now, this entry is a slight stretch on the requirement, as unfortunately somebody did get injured. In this case, hometown Gan Raj boy Neville against Chris Jericho, who used some quick in-ring awareness to save the high flyer from a medical bill that he'd always remember. So, we're back in 2016, and unfortunately Neville had already broken his ankle on the March 14th Raw show. However, Jericho, grasping the gravity of the situation the man that gravity forgot was in, attempted to roll Neville up under the pretense of checking on him in a sort of meta heel finish. For whatever reason though, referee Charles Robinson wasn't on his wavelength. In a further attempt to improvise a new narrative, one that avoided any contact with his opponent, Jericho shoved Robinson in an attempt to get disqualified. Belatedly, he made the call. Now, the whole thing was an absolute mess, not that it mattered, as a muddled finish is nothing compared to a wrestler's career. But if Y2J wasn't as considerate of his ring partner, things could have been so much worse. Number 5. Bret Hart cracks down. Now this one is a testament to the legendary work rate of Bret Hart, as he not only managed to keep the British Bulldog from seriously harming himself, he managed to put on one of the best IC matches ever. At SummerSlam 1992, he squared off against Davey Boy and called most of the match, which isn't actually that uncommon, right? Well, the thing is that British Bulldog had something in common with me and your mum in that we're both crack fiends. There's my one per list. Joking aside, the very unfunny truth was that Bulldog had been up the night before, legit, smoking crack. This meant that Hart had to work around the dangers of a sleep-deprived and come-down heavy wrestler in a manner that was safe and entertaining. Unable to improvise, Bulldog was read the script of the match, and more likely the riot act, behind the curtain. Considering this, it is mind-boggling how good this match was. Number 4. Ryback saves Kalisto. In what would end up being his last match in the WWE, Ryback challenged Kalisto to a US Championship bout on the pre-show of Payback 2016. And early in the contest, he managed to save the champion from what could have been a serious back injury. Kalisto was performing a springboard second rope corkscrew plancha to the outside, but he didn't get enough hang time to reach the big guy. Seeing the luchador was about to slam his spine against the hardest part of the ring, Ryback basically cradled Kalisto in his arms and lowered him safely to the ground. Now, Ryback isn't what you would call a very shrewd man, nor even a very clever man, as some of his in-ring partners have said in rather unflattering terms, but here, well played, you big bastard, as that could have got real nasty. Number 3. Roman Reigns saves Seth Rollins. In late 2015, Seth Rollins suffered a devastating injury to his knee, forcing him to relinquish his WWE Championship. After spending 6 months on the shelf, he sought to retain the title that he'd never lost, so he challenged the then WWE Champion Roman Reigns to a match at 2016's Money in the Bank pay-per-view. During the match, Rollins attempted a sunset flip powerbomb, the same move that actually tore just about every ligament in his knee. Reigns, hoping to prevent another injury to his real-life friend, held onto Rollins' leg as he flipped him over. Now, it might not have looked all that smooth in execution, but it allowed Rollins to hit the mat slower and in a more controlled manner. Sometimes the theatrics have to be curbed a little for the sake of a career, but you won't hear me complaining, as the Architect is still one of my favourite wrestlers in the biz to this day. Number 2. AJ Styles saves James Ellsworth. God damn, this was a close one, as the man without a chin almost ended up without a neck thanks to a misunderstanding on how to take the Styles Clash. Now, it might seem obvious to everyone at home, but this is a move that actually goes against what you want to do with your head, as it likely feels more instinctive to tuck your neck rather than to look up. Which is what Ellsworth didn't do, and he looked on collision course with the mat. Luckily, AJ, being the pro that he is, spotted the error and extended his arms so that they would hit the mat before his knees, and therefore lightening the impact and saving Ellsworth from a potentially career-ending spinal injury. Though Styles would go on to lose the match thanks to Ambrose's shenanigans, his quick thinking during it made him a winner. And number 1, Curt Hennig saves Chris Jericho. This save was simply perfect. On a late 1997 episode of Nitro, Curt Hennig went one-on-one with Chris Jericho. During the ending sequence of this all-too-brief bout, Jericho tried to hit the lion salt onto a prone Hennig. As he bounced off the second rope, he didn't quite get the full rotation, and he was about to land straight on his head. Mercifully, Hennig put his knees up as Jericho came down, preventing him from slamming headfirst against the mat. As you watch this clip, you can hear Jericho's panic as he bounces off the second rope. When he lands, you can see in his face that he knew just how close of a call this was. His expression screams that of, "I almost just died then." Granted, it's likely that Hennig was supposed to put his knees up anyway, but Jericho's near miss was definitely not part of the plan. Planned or unplanned, Curt Hennig saved Chris Jericho's career and possibly his life that night, one of the many reasons why he was always known as Mr. Perfect.